Hello and welcome to another episode of the Podium Podcast. I'm Simon Hartley,
And I'm Tom May.
and over the years I've heard hundreds, if not thousands, of people talking about the power of applying elite sports thinking into business. And I think it's a great idea, I genuinely do. But I'm really interested to know how elite sports thinking applies into business. So during the course of these shows, we are joined by some wonderful people who have made the transition and are now applying their own performance mindset into business. Today, we are joined by a wonderful guest, double Olympic champion, Rebecca Adlington. Welcome to the show, Becky.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's an absolute pleasure. Can you first of all tell us a little bit about how you got into swimming? You know, lots of kids kind of get into swimming when they're young. Were you one of those that kind of got in when you were a tiddler?
Exactly that. I was 3 years old. My parents just put me into lessons, just wanted me to be safe in water. I've got two older sisters, so both of they could fully swim, and it's just for on holidays and things like that. Never ever expected to kind of take it any further. But I guess that's sometimes what happens when you're from a small town, when you don't have so many options of different things to do. I think sometimes you end up doing just the thing that you started off at the youngest age, I think.
Yeah, yeah. Did you just fall in love with it when you got into the water?
Absolutely. I was never one of those that was scared of the water. I just absolutely loved it. Every single week going, I went to my birthday parties at the pool. And then kind of when I got to that age, we start competing around 9 or 10 years old. So it was kind of that join a club and kind of started competing. Don't get me wrong, I did not get good until I was probably 12 maybe, kind of like younger age. I was no Tiger Woods at like 4 doing lengths of butterfly. I was nothing like that. Just yeah, absolutely loved it.
How quickly does the
Brilliant.
training ramp up? Because I know some friends of mine take their kids along to pools really early in the morning. These kids are just up and down. It sounds absolutely brutal.
Oh, and it really is. And I don't want to put people off the sport, but it is brutal. It is one of those that it's not easy. It's kind of like I remember from the age of 11 doing mornings. We were traveling here, there, and everywhere. Even when I was 12, I moved to my coach, who I ended up with for my career, Bill Furness in Nottingham. And it was a 45-minute journey. So we're spending 3 hours a day in the car, getting up at 4:30 in the morning, doing the hours before school, driving straight to school, after school. It is a whole load of commitment.
Do you think there's a
Yeah.
danger when it's like that that you can burn out? You can burn away your love for a sport. Do you think was that ever a concern for you? Did it ever start to impact your love of the sport?
I think at that age it doesn't because you're so young and you have
Yeah.
bags of energy, don't you? And it's kind of just at that age. I think if it was a later in life sport, I think you would. But I think you kind of 11, 12 years old. You don't know what tired is, do you? You're like, woo. So I think it's a little bit different. I think that danger happens when then you get to 18, 19, because you've been doing something for so long already. It's like 8, 9 years that you've dedicated already. And then it's that question, well, do I go to uni? Do I just focus on the sport? And it's a really difficult thing to kind of then in that senior environment. 'Cause the first bit of teens is fun as well. You're just with your
Mm.
mates and it's just fun. It is a very fun environment. Whereas then when you hit that senior level, kind of over that kind of 17, 18 mark, it's intense.
Yeah, yeah. I can remember talking to quite a few swimmers, and a lot of the guys that you'll know, about the moment when all of your mates kind of make those decisions to maybe go on to something else, or they've found boys, they've found girls, they've found bars, they've found alternatives to swimming, and that there's a little bit of a challenge at that stage. Do I follow the crowd and find the bars and all that sort of stuff, or do I keep dedicated and focused on my sport? Did you go through that as well? Did you experience the same kind of moment in time?
Not really. I discovered bars when I retired, and then I discovered day drinking, which was fabulous.
Oh, so good.
It's so good. I much prefer that. I think it was one of those in the sport. I felt like I gained. I didn't feel like I missed out on opportunities. I had two sets of friends. I had my school friends and then I had my swimming friends. And they were equally both such great groups of people and different as well. So I knew that I could, on a Saturday or Sunday, go out with my schoolmates. But then I knew my swimming friends, we would do something a bit more low key, go to the cinema, go out for a meal, something that's not like drinking or that's going to ruin our training week. And it was so lovely because I kind of felt I gained than and ever lost out or kind of went through that period of my life. Plus, swimmers do have a bit of a reputation because we're first week of the Olympics, that second week of the Olympics, we do like to have a little drink. And I think we utilize that 2 weeks that we have off. We only get 2 weeks a year. That is it. So we utilize that 2 weeks.
All in for 2 weeks, like
Pretty
it.
much.
It's we've talked about sacrifice across different professional sports. It's quite interesting what you've just sort of highlighted there. You may dress it up as sacrifice, but actually, really, you're increasing your circle of friends. You're increasing your opportunities because you're doing something with another group. Yes, you may miss out on weddings or birthdays or going to the pub with your friends, but there are other ways to I guess benefit from different aspects of life that you might be with teammates or your swimming coaches or whoever it might be. It's quite an interesting different take on it that you've taken there.
And I completely agree with that. I think, yes, I kind of like, I can't go to that party. But then I'm also flying off to America for a training camp and I've traveled the world. I've met some incredible people. Like I was coming back to my friends at 19 going, I've just met David Beckham at the Olympic Village, or I've just met this person and I've been to Buckingham Palace to meet the Queen and I've traveled all these places in the world. I'm sorry, I'd happily miss out on a party for that. Like the benefits and what I gained. I made friends worldwide. I met incredible people, traveled the world. I was earning an income when all my friends are going, I can't even afford to go out and I can't find a job. And there's me going, yes, swimmers do not earn a lot, don't get me wrong, but I've got a little bit of funding coming in. I can spend 20 quid to go out for a meal. So I felt like I was in a better position.
Yeah. There are bound to be some challenges that come along through anybody's athletic career. What were the big challenges that you found?
Oh God, there is a lot. And obviously illness. I think illness kind of plagued my family, if you like, all kind of at the same time. So definitely kind of from that illness aspect. Swimmers are quite lucky that we don't have huge amount of injuries because we're not a contact sport. So that kind of ease. Obviously I did have them 6 months into London. I was just trying to manage a shoulder injury and it was literally, there was no option to make this better because we're only 6 months out for the game. So you've just got to manage it and you've just got to push through. I wasn't going to pull out of the Olympics. I was like, I don't care what I have to do to strap my shoulder up, do whatever. I'm making sure that I can be at the Olympics and I'll just grit my teeth and then I'll rest after that and I'll sort it out after that. It was just get through. I think a lot of mine was external stuff. I didn't feel like I had somebody in my sport to really go to. We hadn't had a double Olympic champion before, so I kind of didn't feel like I had that support network. I didn't have somebody to pick up the phone and go, is this normal? And what do I do here? And how do I navigate this? And trolling and social media and being a woman in sport and yet being only criticized on my appearance. I'd never experienced anything like it. So I just kind of felt like I didn't really have anywhere to go with or even a place to ask these questions to anyone, because everyone I asked, even my coach, teammates, they just went, I don't really know. That was their answer to everything, which they tried to help and listen to me, but I just don't feel like there was anything there to kind of really help me navigate such a difficult, life-changing process in my life.
How did you react directly to all of those, the negatives? Because there are negatives across all sport, and the social media side of it is just revolting at times. How did you, I guess, sort of internally, because you've got nowhere else to go with that, you're having to deal with it yourself. What aspects of your character really helped you through that period of time?
I think as an athlete, and especially in swimming, I was very different in the pool to out of the pool. in the pool, I was focused. Don't mess with me. I've got a job to do. I want to succeed. And my coach always said I was a bit more animal in the pool. And then I got out and I'm like, oh, hey, and it's like, I'm a different person. And I think having that separation is kind of what I had to do with that social media side or that negative side, because I had to separate it from my performance. People weren't criticizing me for my performance. They were criticizing me personally. So I had to separate the two. And I'm very lucky that I still found confidence from my sport and my performance, because that's the only thing that helped. Otherwise, I'd have been a crumbling mess on the floor, because I'd have just been absolutely battered and beaten down. So I think sport really gave me that. Okay, well, I am still good at something and I still have a purpose and this is what I'm driving towards. And that sort of stuff doesn't matter in performance. So I think that really, really helped. And just having great family as well. Like my family were brilliant. And it was kind of like when I did I'm a Celeb, I left my sister in charge of my social media account, thinking she'd be great and it would be fine. I came out, she literally launched the phone at me and she's like, I don't ever want to see anything like that again. It scarred me. I don't know how you deal with it. But to me, I'd become like desensitized to it. I was so used to seeing it and I didn't even understand the impact of what it would have on somebody else seeing it. It was just, for me, I was like, yeah, I'm used to just block it, ignore. Whereas for somebody else, it's kind of like, it scarred her, I think.
Yeah.
People don't realise, I think, the impact that some of those individuals can have on sports people. Have you taken, I guess, some of the elements of what you learnt about that period of time forward into your life? And are you still using those elements of it? Or?
I think just as you get older, you just become a bit, am I allowed to swear?
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
have by mistake once or twice, so yeah.
I'll say it in a nice way. I think as you get older, you go F it a little bit more and you just kind of don't care on certain aspects. And I kind of feel like the older I've got, I've become a mum. I can't deal with petty people or people I don't know. I don't even entertain your opinion. If I don't value your opinion, I'm not going to entertain it even for a second. So it literally goes in and out because I'm like, you're not worth my time in that aspect. I've just got to go F it. So I think that's certainly helped with some things. And I think that's naturally just happened as I've got older. And hey, my social media stuff's way less now. I think people just realize I'm not going to give you attention. I'm just going to block you. So
yeah, go somewhere else. Simon, I realize I'm hogging the mic here, but I'm going to jump in. There's one other thing that you just mentioned there, in that it's something my wife said it to me 2 or 3 times. 2 or 3 times I can remember, so it's clearly very more. She says, you really don't care about what people say to you or what people think. I actually do not. And it's quite. I've never really thought about it. But what you've just mentioned there, if I don't value your opinion, honestly, I really don't care what you think. Whereas on the flip side of that, she gets quite affected by what other people think or what other people say. Maybe sport as an industry steals you to the thoughts and opinions of what other people. Because I've had people come up to me having played a game of rugby, and quite frankly, I know I've not played at my best, and they'll come up to me with a pint in hand and say, you're absolutely diabolical today. Well, okay, I can't walk into your office and say, you're the worst accountant that I've ever experienced because you messed up the numbers today. You just don't do that in different industries. And maybe sport steals you to those opinions that quite frankly, you don't need to be listening to.
See, I think it's just a case of we accept criticism because that's how we get better. You have to get that criticism because your analysis after a game, a swim, whatever it is so intense. We kind of literally pull everything apart. And the only way to learn is to understand those negatives, to understand that criticism, to kind of learn how to improve. You don't do that in every meeting that you do at work. Like I come away from meetings and I kind of pull myself apart because I'm so used to doing that as an athlete that I kind of almost have to have a debrief in my own head after a day. If it's been a heavy day at work, I don't just mean every day, but sometimes after like a board meeting or something, I kind of have to pick it apart because that's how I'm used to processing it. And I'm used to that feedback as well. That is what your coach and your support team are there for, is giving you that feedback. Whereas I think in the office, nobody directly comes up to you, like you've just said, and go, God, you were crap in that meeting. What was going on? And you were all over the place. Like, they don't give you that. Well, they kind of might do. Some of ours have sometimes, but in a nicer way. But I think that's sport definitely gives you that. And I think sport makes you realize it's not personal, because that's what I've noticed with, like, even my husband, like you say, he'll take things a lot more personally than I do. And I'm like, well, why? It's just business, or it's just this. It's not a personal attack. They've just given you feedback to improve. And I think sports people are a bit more open to that, I think.
One of the, I think, fairly unique experiences of being an athlete, and actually I think it's exacerbated as an Olympic athlete often, is that you are sort of flung into the limelight in an instant. Because, although you're aware of what you're doing behind the scenes, most of the world doesn't see that. They only see you when you walk out onto poolside in an Olympic final, pick up a medal, and all of a sudden then you're front page news. And it happens in such a tiny amount of time, if you think about it. And it must take an incredible amount of getting used to, because I don't know if you can ever prepare yourself for that. But as Tom was saying, I also think most athletes criticize themselves more than the press ever would. You kind of dig deeper. Although you will be publicly criticized if you don't perform, etc., you probably are more demanding of yourself, more challenging of yourself than they probably ever would be. So I suspect there is a little element where that bit of it, the sort of the public bit, is water off a duck's back.
And it has to be, because you put the most pressure on yourself. Nobody else is putting that amount of pressure on you, only you. And at the end of it, if you don't perform, it's only me sat there crying, nobody else. There's not anybody else around me that's kind of like bothered. They go, oh, okay, well, that's a bit disappointing. And then they crack on with life. It's me there left a mess for a couple of days and never really getting over that. Whereas no one else cares.
No. John Wilkin mentioned something when we were chatting a bit about this. He was like, You're never really as good as you think you were, and you're never really as bad as you thought you were.
It's true.
And no matter how crap someone thought you were, you probably weren't that bad. I found those sort of highs and lows in sport just like, it's quite tough to deal with at times.
Whether you're a world champion or a world record holder, you've always been beat. So there's always somebody better than you, and there's always somebody worse than you. Always. That's sport.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm really keen to understand how you started to translate this into business. I mean, first of all, where did this sort of spark of inspiration come from for the business? I'm thinking particularly about Learn to Swim business, but I'd love to explore the others as we go as well.
No, it was after London. Well, pretty much at London. I knew it was my last Olympics, and I kind of sat there and kind of tried to just start thinking. I was really ill the second week of the Olympics. Everyone else was going out getting drunk, and there's me on antibiotics with a chest infection, just sat in my apartment in London, like, oh. So it was a bit of a depression.
So you were struggling for positives then?
I felt awful, and I was like, this is my last Olympic Games, and I'm so ill. And there was a photo of me, and I went out one night and I left at like 9 o'clock because I felt so ill, and I was like, I can't even deal with it. But because I'm so ill, it looks like I'm drunk stumbling out. And then the press put it in the thing that's Rec Addington drunk. And I was like, it was 9 o'clock at night and I'm just so ill. I was not drunk. But anyway, I think
might have been day drinking.
Well, I wish I was. I learned that after London Olympics. I learned to day drink. Now it's my favourite. But I think it was one of those in London. It was Inspire a Generation. It was that whole legacy motto. And I kind of sat there going, well, I've worked with these people over the past 4 years between Beijing and London on trying to promote the sport. And I was like, well, do I go down like a government route and really lobby Parliament to try and get national curriculum, the Better Ofsted, kind of really hammer that kind of school swimming aspect? And then I thought, well, actually, how can I, if I'm personally not doing anything about it? I kind of feel like that's not a good way to go about it. Why don't I try and do something about it first? And then I can always come back to that in years to come if I've not worked out the solution in that time. And that's kind of where the idea grew from, really. And I sat down with Steve Parry, fellow Olympian and who already had his Learn to Swim program, Total Swimming. And I just said, I really want to do something in this sector. I really want to set up my own, get gym partners, utilizing that water space, because pool space is gold dust. You won't find any pools with empty pool space. And if you know anyone, please pass them my way, because we will put just a program in there, because it is gold dust, because there's just not enough pools to cater for the amount of children and people that we've got in the country. And that's kind of where it grew from, really. So kind of set it up at the back end of 2012, kind of start of 2013. And Becky Adams Swim Stars is still here today. And as a Learn to Swim company, we have 30,000 kids a week swimming on our programs.
So is that the same business that Al Scotch is involved in?
Yeah, so Al was, is not anymore, but but for years and years he was. And I think we've just merged businesses. So we have 3 different businesses under one umbrella, which is Swim, Total Swimming, and Becky Adams Swim Stars.
Great, awesome.
That's brilliant. So, I mean, how do you go from nothing to 30,000 kids a week? I mean, that in itself sounds like an enormous challenge.
It certainly is. And especially with COVID thrown in there, because they shut all the swimming pools. So that was a really, really tough period. But it's one of those that we kind of know what we're trying to achieve. We want to revolutionize the sport. Swim is our purpose built. So there, where we go into a facility and it's just solely kids swimming lessons from the minute we open our doors to the minute we close. It's not a public facility. Total Swimming is affecting community. So they're mainly in schools. So we'll go into a school, we'll give them some investment, we'll help them get their pool to where they need to be, and then we'll deliver school swimming just after school. So they'll have their school swimming in the day, so the school can use it, obviously, and then we'll go in after school. And then Becky Adams Swim Stars is just in commercial gym partnerships. So they're all very different. So that's where the 30,000 kind of, as you group them together, because we're nationwide as well. And we're still only something like 5% of the market. Even with 30,000, it's such a small market that we're in. We're only such a small, percentage of that whole market.
Yeah. It's amazing. I mean, you must have learned so much along the way about, kind of getting teams together, getting a staff team, marketing, logistics, pool hire, all sorts of stuff. What along the journey do you think probably took you furthest outside of your comfort zone?
Oh, that's a great question. Probably finance, anything finance, I'm terrible at. When you sit in finance stuff, we did some finance training yesterday, and you're just like, whoa. And I think athletes I don't know any athletes, unless you've specialised in that understand anything financial. You don't get involved in that in your club. You don't go up to your club, do you, going, well, what's your turnover this year? And kind of what's your EBITDA? And where does your revenue come from? And can I understand all this? You don't, do you? As an athlete, you do not ask those questions.
The only numbers I hunted out were the numbers on the 3rd page of my contract. and even then I was like, well, does that mean I get that? Or what happens then? It's one of those things. I completely agree with you. Finance and technology. Weirdly, I'm involved in both now. But when I was sort of leaving university, I was just like, I have no interest in this.
I kind of want to have an interest, but when I feel like I've got a certain part and I'm like, okay, I fully understand this part, next time it comes to the same thing and I'm like, okay, well, we just do this. And then they go, no. And I'm like, I've only just understood that bit. And it's such a frustrating thing with finance and all the language. I find the language really difficult. I'm like, why don't you just call a spade a spade? What is all this terminology?
That's quite interesting. I found that when I finished playing as well, you'd meet people, whether they be new contacts or slightly older acquaintances, and they just bamboozle you with letters, and you're like, what? Like, can you say that in just normal English?
Language.
So I know what you're talking. Yeah, like make things easy, and that sport is very good for communicating. You have to be very direct when you're communicating, very clear about what you want.
Yeah.
And I guess there's probably 2 elements in that they were far more advanced with their understanding, so that they were using that language. But also, I think there's an element of the corporate world is like, right, I'm going to catch these guys out because they've left the sport at the top of their game. They're coming in, and now it's they're not they're not that person anymore. I'm going to make them feel uncomfortable. There are a few people around like that as well that I've come across, and that's the language thing. I was just like, that could be completely revamped by sport. We talk about that, Simon, don't we? What can business learn from sport? Well, maybe you can just be far more clear in how you're talking about things.
And I think that reward as well. I think that part of business, the thing that I've learned is the reward aspect isn't as clear either. There's no medal at the end of it. There's no, okay, we've won that match and that's clear, right? You're the winners. It's a lot smaller percentage of that success. So you've kind of really got to make sure that that reward and that kind of recognition is always there in business, because that's how you motivate people. Because that's how we did in sport. You would win and that would keep you motivated to go on further, wouldn't it? That would kind of drive you. That's that motivation to get up every day doing that work. So I've kind of learned as well that reward and recognition to people is so vital in business. Otherwise, they won't be motivated. They won't be inspired, because there'll just be nothing at the end of it, and it'll just be the same every day.
Yeah, absolutely. What else have you learned from your athletic days? Either in terms of experiences you had or characteristics that you developed or lessons that you use pretty much every day now with business challenges?
I think Tom's already mentioned one, which is communication. I think we're very used to kind of that how we just voice our opinions and kind of how open we are. I think sports people are very, very open and honest. We're so transparent in our company, which I don't think happens in many other businesses. But I think that's because there's 3 Olympians that are the shareholders and the owners, and we're so transparent with stuff because sport is very transparent. You kind of know what you're doing every single day. So I think that is really, really kind of obvious when you step into our business, just how transparent we are with the whole team. I think another thing is I'm very decisive. I probably only need 50% of the information to make a decision. I don't need that full 100%, because in an athlete's terms, you don't have all the information because your coach and your team do. You would probably only always know that. I never questioned my coach why I was constantly doing something. Sometimes you did, obviously, just to learn. But I never had all the information myself, because my coach did and my sports scientist did and your physio. Everyone has their nuggets. And so I think, again, I don't need the full information to be decisive. Tell me half of it and I'll tell you what I think and what my decision will be. I don't know whether you guys find that. You're smiling, Tom, so I'm hoping you do.
I was just thinking that so when they started trying to make me get into an ice bath, and they were like, "This is not 100% research on this. Well, there's not 100% research. I'm not getting in it." So
I did exactly the same thing.
I'm not getting in that wheelie bin until you can prove to me. I want it there, signed, sealed, delivered.
You know what? I'm exactly the same. So many people ask me my thought on ice baths, and my coach said exactly the same to me. Look, the full research isn't there on ice baths. So I went, nope.
Not doing it then.
Unless you could tell me I'm going to benefit massively from this.
Yeah.
I ain't doing it.
Yeah.
So I'll give you the view from sports science on this one. First football coach I ever spoke to about ice baths, he said to me, "Come on, what's the research behind it?" And I said at the time, "There's a bit, it makes logical sense as well." And he said, "I reckon we should just do it to get our own back on them anyway. So let's shove them in."
Yeah, exactly. That's what it's all about. We used to go up to there was a college outside Northampton. Was it Molesford College, something like that? Moulton College, and we'd train and we'd all drive. We'd all have lunch. And it was just like, oh, this thing's coming. So they'd drive us to Moulton College. We all drive out there ourselves. You get there and you go into these ice chamber, or like, what do you call them? Don't even know what you call it. They're a bit like big freezers, basically. So you open the front door.
Yeah, the cryo ones.
Walked into the first one and it was minus 90, and you got 30 seconds in there. Then you went further into it and you got a minute and a half at minus 160. And lads are just like, what? I just want to throw a ball around. I don't want to, we had a couple of guys that had dreadlocks, and they're like trying to get in there with wet hair, and the people are like, "No, your hair's going to snap off," and all. It's like, what are we doing in here? This is ridiculous.
I think I'd gain more from just having a nice hot bath.
Yeah, and I was always knackered at the end of it. Come out driving home, you just got the nod on.
So obviously there's a lot of stuff that you can take from your athletic career into business. Is there anything that you've learned from business that you think, in hindsight, if I was to be an athlete again, I'd bring this back into sport with me?
Oh, that's a really great one. Um, I think I'd probably say a couple of things. I don't know whether this is a common theme in athletes. I've been a control freak. I think we have to be as an athlete. I think there's that element of, okay, what can I control? My sports scientist always used to talk to me about controlling the controllables and all that sort of
Mm.
stuff and kind of that. And I think there was a lot of that in my career because it was me. It was an individual sport, so I felt very protective of that. Whereas I think if I was probably to do it again in an individual sport, I would ease that control to those people a little bit more. And it's not the fact that I didn't trust my team, because I did 100%. I think I just kind of felt like I had to control it because then I needed that to then stand up on the block. So I kind of feel like maybe I should have eased a little bit on that
Mm.
aspect, and maybe that would have helped more, because they're the ones with all the knowledge. So actually, if I ease that control, I might have learned probably 1% more rather than just shutting it down, going, well, no, I can't control that. So I
That's
think definitely in that, because I've definitely become less controlling now, I
Yeah,
hope.
that's really interesting because having worked with Chris Cook for many many years, I noticed towards the back end of his career, he started to lead that multidisciplinary team around him to get more out of them. He was almost like the leader, the manager of his team. The coach was a member of it. The sports science guys were a member of it, and I can remember him being quite active in drawing that out of them. And it changed my view actually on individual athletes, because you swim up and down a pool on your own. People think of you as an individual, but actually quite a few, like you said, see themselves as part of a team because the coach is part of the team, the physio is part of the team, the sports science guys are part of the team. So yeah, it's a really really interesting little insight. I think probably more individual athletes have the opportunity to get more from their teams. Brilliant.
Definitely. And I definitely wish I had done that because I didn't have a nutritionist. There was definitely people in my team. I mean, we're talking 10 years ago. So
Mm.
it wasn't the way sport is now. Like everyone has these people on their teams now. Like the sports psychologist wasn't an absolute given. I kind of really had to push that because I had used one. Whereas I think there is so much delegation and use of that team. I didn't have a physio that was like just for me or even just part of my center. So they were so kind of spread thinly. Whereas I think that's not maximizing that team. We're not working together here because I'm not even seeing you for like 2 weeks. So I think having that kind of on site, that knowing that team and bringing that team together a lot more. I never actually sat down with everybody in my team and had a conversation all together of what our goal is, because we're all so spread out. Obviously not my coach or my sports scientist, but everyone
Mm.
else was. The strength and conditioning wasn't part of our program. The physio wasn't part of our program. I didn't have a nutritionist. The sports psychologist didn't live in our area either. So everyone was so spread out. And I'm like, you can't
Mm.
have a successful board meeting unless everyone's there and working together. And
Yeah, yeah.
I just wish I had done that a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. We have some quick fire questions. Well, more specifically, Tom has some quick fire questions.
Okay.
So, handing the baton to you, Tom.
Yeah. Okay, Becky, if you hadn't been a professional athlete, what would you have been? And is there another vocation that took your interest?
Um, no, I only ever knew swimming from because I did it from 3 years old, and I probably would have ended up being like a swim teacher, a PE teacher, like my sister's a teacher. And you might have noticed I'm a little bit bossy and I love to chat, so I think I would work well as a teacher.
Like it. Who do you? I wasn't going to go. I hadn't noticed you've been bossy. I haven't been
Okay,
too bossy
good.
for us, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
good.
In my house, I'm used to that, so it's fine. Who do you admire most in sport and business?
Oh, in sport, and to be honest, everything he's done afterwards is Sir Chris Hoy. I just think he's absolutely phenomenal. He helped me so much kind of in my career and kind of helping me navigate certain situations, and just that experience. I've listened to him doing public speaking events as well, and he is just absolutely phenomenal. His attention to detail and professionalism, and just everything that he does at such a high standard, and everything he's done with Hoy Bikes and everything since his books,
Mm.
he's kind of created this whole empire of everything, which is just absolutely incredible, and someone I definitely look up to just from how he handles himself as well, not only his success of all those areas of business.
Okay, and you've got some funds to invest. Simon's taking a massive wad of cash out of his back pocket, and he's giving it to you. What are you going to invest it in?
And I think it's very obvious that I will invest it in kids learning how to swim, as drowning rates, as you can imagine, are still going up. They've gone up over the past couple of years, obviously COVID times, but the drowning rates are so high. It's so hard to measure on Ofsted, so not many schools take it really seriously. So I just want to invest it back into the sport, giving more children that opportunity to swim, and just breaking down those barriers and just getting them learning a life skill.
Yeah, brilliant.
Brilliant.
It'd take you a lot of cash to make my daughter swim. I tell you that. You can only watch one
you
film.
Could try. Let's do that challenge.
Yeah, that's a big investment. Trust me. You can only watch one film for the rest of your life. What would it be?
Oh, that is so hard. I don't know. I'd have to pick something really easy to watch, probably like a kids film like Shrek or Toy Story or something that's just a kids film. I wouldn't want something too heavy. I couldn't watch Titanic or anything every day, could you? You'd be depressed. It would
fill your days up.
Oh,
that
God.
long.
My husband's obsessed with Lord of the Rings, and I'm like, I can't. It's so long. I can't. I can't deal with that film. So I'd definitely pick something light-hearted.
Brilliant. Love it. There you go. My quick fire question is done.
Fantastic.
I'm going to be thinking about that film all day.
It's going to plague you. Yeah, exactly.
I'm just thinking it's ages since I watched Toy Story or Monsters Inc. or anything like that. I might just dig out the DVD.
That's the rest of your day planned out.
Do you know what?
Yeah,
it's only because I've just come back from Florida. I took my kids to Disney. So it's only because I've got Disney on my brain that I'm like, okay, we've just the Minions ride, all that sort of stuff. I just think they're hilarious. So, and I absolutely loved it. That's why I'm thinking Disney.
Fantastic. Well, that's us hitting the buffer at the end of the tracks. Thank you very much, Tom. Thank you very, very much, Becky. It's been absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed the conversation. Time has flown, as always. Thank you guys very much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again on another episode of the Podium Podcast. Becky shared so many gems through our conversation, but there were a couple that really stuck out for me. First of all, she said, some people call them sacrifices, other people call them choices. She decided not to go out drinking in bars with her mates. She dedicated herself to her swimming, which meant that she got to travel the world and meet amazing people. And that's not a sacrifice, that's a positive choice. Becky and Tom also talked about the challenges of responding to critical feedback that we get from other people. And they said, if we're happy to really scrutinise our own performance, other people's feedback tends to have less impact. And finally, Becky said that business doesn't inherently have that reward of winning the gold medal or winning the contest, but it doesn't mean we can't create that dynamic. She deliberately builds it into her business. I hope that really helps. See you again soon.